We're pleased to welcome back to the program TSN hockey insider Darren Dreger joins us now. Darren, good morning. Appreciate you jumping on with us so quickly here. Obviously, a huge trade with significant ramifications here in Winnipeg and in Columbus and really throughout the entire NHL. How quickly did this come together? We know we saw your tweet last night, and then obviously, things progressed over the night, and then this morning it seems like they restarted. How quickly did this trade come together between the Jets and the Blue Jackets?
Well, I wouldn't say it was quick. These deals of this magnitude don't happen very often, and appreciably it takes months of discussion. And I think in this case it does go back that far. Now, I don't know that Cheveldayoff and Kekalainen had multiple conversations over the past number of months dating back to the off-season specific about Pierre-Luc Dubois for Patrick Laine. But you guys, of course, recall the speculation around the availability of Patrick Laine months ago. And I'm sure Chevy would have taken calls from a number of general managers, and Jarmo likely was among them. But I don't know that they got to the specifics of Dubois for Laine as the primary pieces until very recently. And the truth is that, this process probably would have dragged out further if not for what happened earlier this week with Pierre-Luc Dubois in Columbus and the subsequent benching decision made by John Tortorella, head coach of the Columbus Blue Jackets. That expedited the process. But Jarmo Kekalainen had 20-plus general managers inquiring on Pierre-Luc Dubois, and his ask was incredibly high. And so Winnipeg, paid an extreme price to get a very sought-after centerman in Pierre-Luc Dubois. But I think that there have been discussions about a bigger picture trade for quite some time, but I don't think that they really started hammering out on Pierre-Luc Dubois for Patrick Laine and Jack Roslovic until recently.
Darren, for casual hockey fans or maybe hockey fans who don't, follow the Columbus Blue Jackets closely, and their only image or their most recent image of Pierre-Luc Dubois is that shift that occurred on, I believe it was Thursday night or Wednesday night now, that led to the benching where the effort was lacking. What would you say to Jets fans or hockey fans in Winnipeg who are worried that that is the type of effort that is synonymous with Pierre-Luc Dubois, as opposed to, from my perspective, that's more of an outlier shift than it is anything that is a reputation of his?
Well, yeah, that shift is not synonymous with Pierre-Luc Dubois in his game. And you're 100% right. I mean, anybody who looks at that shift and says, well, Winnipeg is getting a lazy hockey player, knows nothing about the game of Pierre-Luc Dubois and hasn't paid any attention to his development since, he was a high draft pick of the Columbus Blue Jackets. So there should be zero concern about the effort and commitment that Pierre-Luc Dubois is bringing to Winnipeg. He is very happy with this trade. He is very much looking forward to, finding his way with the Jets, playing for Paul Maurice. Let's not overlook that. And just hitting the reset button. So there should be zero concern about the athlete or the level of compete that Pierre-Luc Dubois is bringing to Winnipeg. I mean, look, everybody has a breaking point. And what led Pierre-Luc Dubois to that point with John Tortorella and the Columbus Blue Jackets, we may never know. But let's not indict this young man based on a 20-second shift. His game is deep, and I would say this. When I look at centers around the National Hockey League, there are some great 1-2 punches in the NHL. I think of Matthews and Tavares in Toronto. You've got Draisaitl and Connor McDavid, obviously, in Edmonton. You've got the history of Sidney Crosby and the depth of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Well, you know what? For me, Mark Scheifele and Pierre-Luc Dubois, they can fit in that conversation. I'm not saying Winnipeg has the best 1-2 punch in the league, but Winnipeg got a lot better with this trade.
You're listening to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on TSN Radio 1290. TSN Hockey Insider Darren Dreger is our guest, discussing the Patrick Laine and Jack Roslovic for Pierre-Luc Dubois and a 2022 third-round pick trade from earlier this morning.
Darren, your colleague Frank Saravelli tweeted this out about, I think it was about 50 minutes ago, just under an hour, that the Columbus Blue Jackets will be retaining 26% of Patrick Laine's salary. And the question that I wanted to ask you was how big of a part of this deal is that, and how much of that has to do with Pierre-Luc Dubois having 1 year left on his contract after this year?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it. There's always the business side of the game, right? And for cap reasons, whatever, retaining salary in today's NHL world when you're making trades like this is common ground. Randomly, you don't come up with a number like 26%. It must have had to do with, just cap management from the Columbus Blue Jackets perspective. But don't also look solely at the contract remaining for Pierre-Luc Dubois or for Patrick Laine. Just because of the age of these players and where they're at in their careers, I believe Winnipeg retains the rights of Pierre-Luc Dubois for 4 years. So, there's terrific opportunity here to get something done long term. But that's not going to be the focus. The focus for Dubois is to come into Winnipeg, get settled, and find his place. And, then the business side, again, will take over. I have no doubt that the Winnipeg Jets will very quickly get to his agents, Pat Brisson from CAA Sports, when they're allowed to do so in the summer, to start that process of looking at a contract extension. But, again, when you're boiling down this trade, Columbus probably knew that they were going to work out a deal very quickly to get Jack Roslovic signed and back into the National Hockey League. So just going through cap gymnastics, they would have required Winnipeg to eat some of Laine's salary.
Darren, and one thing we've obviously focused on is the idea of you don't want a Jacob Trouba situation with Patrick Laine. You don't want a player who's going to walk himself almost to UFA and then leave.
Right.
And that was obviously a big concern here in Winnipeg. With Pierre-Luc Dubois, I mean, you touched on it, that it's not something that they would discuss soon, but do you think that is obviously something that they've kind of the Jets have a pretty good indication as to this is a player, especially his dad's the assistant coach, obviously, with the Manitoba Moose. This is a player that they could retain long term?
That would be the hope. I think that would be the hope. And it's also allocating your invested dollars. There's been much speculation, even though we don't know what the numbers would have been for Patrick Laine, but let's just say in a healthier league, you're talking around $9 million to extend Patrick Laine. Well, can you afford to do that? Can you afford to do that, with a winger as opposed to a centerman? Who knows what Pierre-Luc Dubois is going to command when there's an opportunity to extend him. But I can tell you this, pretty much every team in the National Hockey League, if they're investing big money in an individual player, would rather do it with a centerman as opposed to a winger. And then it gets amplified when, in this case, Patrick Laine, for his own personal reasons, didn't see himself as a long-term fit in Winnipeg. So the leverage then has to go back to the general manager, Cheveldayoff, who's got to try and maximize his return. Jack Roslovic asked for a trade. He was never playing in Winnipeg again. Patrick Laine's days in Winnipeg, games in Winnipeg, can absolutely be measured in games, not years. So for, Cheveldayoff to move a player who wasn't going to play in Winnipeg and Roslovic, and move Patrick Laine, a player who probably wasn't coming back to Winnipeg after this season, for a real good piece up the middle in Pierre-Luc Dubois. I mean, whatever risk or gamble that comes into this when looking beyond this season and beyond next season, when Pierre-Luc Dubois' contract is up, I mean, that's just part of doing business in the NHL. And the Winnipeg Jets will use Dubois to go as deep as they can this year and next year. And like I said earlier, chances are they'll begin negotiations in the summer, but they can't be worried about that now.
Darren, final question for you. Darren Dreger, our guest here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. When you draft players second overall or third overall, like the Jets did with Laine and the Blue Jackets did with Dubois, you expect them to be cornerstones of your franchise for longer than just, 5 years. I remember when the Jets won the draft lottery to draft Laine, they thought, generational talent, generational player, 10 years plus. For both the Blue Jackets organization and the Jets organization, the excitement obviously is palpable, but does there need to be some sort of examination in the organization to find out why things went so wrong with both of these players so quickly?
Well, I guess I understand your thinking on this, but because it is a unique situation. In fact, if you want to extend it to Jack Roslovic, you're talking about 3 disgruntled players here and 2 teams who own the rights to these players coming together and hoping for a much better future. So it is unique. I'll give you that. It's unique. But I don't know that there has to be a lot of soul-searching, by both clubs here. I mean, the business side of the sport has really taken over. And younger players now have way more business savvy and swagger than they ever have before. So a player coming out of his entry-level contract has no problem holding the feet of the organization to the fire in dealing on that second contract. And then you go beyond that. And for whatever reason, things did not work out for Pierre-Luc Dubois in Columbus. That doesn't mean there has to be a forensic audit of how business is done in Columbus. And likewise for Patrick Laine and Jack Roslovic in Winnipeg. Laine has his reasons for not wanting to be a long-term fit with the Winnipeg Jets. Jack Roslovic took a hard-line position. That entirely is up to him and his agent, Claude Lemieux. But is that the fault of the Winnipeg Jets organization? Look around the league, fellas. There are players who are unhappy with their situation on every team in the National Hockey League. It just doesn't work out for them as conveniently as this has worked out, in my opinion, for Laine Roslovic and Pierre-Luc Dubois.